Ohma Tikinagan, Mesde Bertamang, Mihima Iskunagan Ehtik, Kananantunamak. Mandogadan the Venamugoman, Koyak Chikanan Makani Jan Snanak, Mina Chamaskawatoika, the Benchgavan, Mina Gatskunagan Nanan. Ogamakana go give Nasawa Tikinagan, who had to do the minute. Abinojis, Mihawe Niganu at Ganimaz Tamagoyak. We just nam Hiwe Chuganawen Mausian. Nanda Hima Chugabeshian Chuganawen Mausian. Give again Tikinagan.org. Nanda Ganus, Basic, Nisaso, Wawi Bigan, Niwan, Nugudaso, Nianan, Nisan Nugudaso, Nishan, Niwan.
Wache, bonjour. You are now listening to Kahkenuh Aweyuk, Everyone Together on TikTok Radio, hosted by Tikinagan Child and Family Services. We appreciate you tuning into our weekly program every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern on Wawate Radio. Tikinagan is a community-based child and well-being agency rooted in and accountable to the First Nation communities we serve. We are here because we want to protect our children, help our families, and nurture our communities. To learn more about Tikinagan, visit tikinagan.org.
Hello, bonjour, wache. Thanks for tuning in to Kahkenuh Aweyuk. I'm your host, Terry Tikinagan. Tikinagan Child and Family Services celebrated Pride Month throughout June. Kieran Davis is one of the hosts of When the Frogs Sleep podcast, bringing Indigenous bedtime stories to youth in Treaty 3 territory and beyond. Kieran is Two-Spirit, and we talk to them about their journey discovering their gender identity.
My name is Kieran Davis. My pronouns are he, they. I'm 21 years old.
So Kieran, where are you from, and did you grow up there?
I'm from Laxville First Nations. I grew up there until I was almost 6, and then we moved to Thunder Bay for 5 years. And then we're now living in Sulakaut.
And how old were you when you first started exploring your gender identity?
I was about 15 years old when I started exploring my gender identity.
Can you maybe elaborate on that a little?
I didn't know what being transgender meant or gender identity at all until I was about 13 years old when I saw a speaker who attended a We Day event in Thunder Bay, and that's when I found out that was very possible. And I questioned myself until then, but I started exploring when I'd cut my hair off, and I met a lot of other queer people that allowed me to feel safe to be who I am and express myself in the ways that I felt.
And how old were you when you first came out as transgender?
I was about 15 years old when I came out as transgender. It was about 3 months after I'd cut my hair off and donated it that I'd come out. And the family and friends that were around, they actually knew prior to my coming out that I was transgender.
What was the reaction like from those that you first told?
The reaction from my family and friends were pretty welcoming, as more and more people of my friend group and my family had been coming out in their own ways with their sexuality and gender as well. So my family was pretty educated on that. For part of my family, it was pretty hard to get them used to using my name and pronouns and understanding what being transgender meant.
And how did that positive reception make you feel?
I felt safe enough to be who I was, and in my family, my mom is an educator, and she did her best to be very educated in gender and sexuality so that her students could also feel safe in the school that they went to and the places that they were. So for her to be more accepting for me was very important to her.
Okay, so you've mentioned your friends and your family, but what was the reaction like from your community?
The reaction from my community was hit or miss with the acceptance and the ignorance that came with it. There are a lot of small-minded people from where I'm from, and with that, I got a lot of backlash and a lot of people telling me that, I was still a girl, or I'll still always be a woman, or just because of what's underneath my pants doesn't mean that I'm not. not a woman or not a man. And I'm neither. I'm two-spirit as well.
How were you able to overcome that negativity? Were there resources or people who got you through that?
So Sulakaut started a GSA club, which is a gay straight alliance in the community, and there was a lot of resources that came with that, with gender and sexuality. And so it was a club that I joined when I was an ally to the community before I had actually come out, and those people made me feel safe and educated on who I am, and the feelings that I had towards myself were all coming together through their education and resources that they provided.
And reflecting on that time period, looking back, what kind of resources do you wish you had available to you in your community that could have supported your journey?
The resources that I needed most were the Two-Spirit resources and teachings. I didn't start exploring the Two-Spirit community or teachings until following high school, when I started working for Grand Council Treaty 3 and was nominated to sit on the 2S LGBTQIA+ council. And through that is where I got my Two-Spirit teachings and knowledge that I do have now. And even still, I'm still meeting a whole bunch of Two-Spirit elders and teachers and knowledge keepers that still continue to teach me every day.
You touched upon this earlier, but were there challenges when people were adjusting to your pronouns?
There were quite a few challenges when adjusting to my pronouns. Like in high school, I still played sports even after coming out, so it was difficult for people to see me on the girls' sports team and still refer to me as a man, or using he, him pronouns. And for my half of my family, they attended church, which led them to have that small-mindedness of, oh, there's only man, there's only woman, and whatever you were born as is what you are. And so it took my grandparents 3 years to finally use my name and pronouns. And they do now, and they love and accept me, but it's taken a long time to rebuild that.
Can you tell us a bit about the kind of experiences that you've had related to being transgender?
The experience I've had being transgender and open about it is there's a lot of publicity that has come from all the work that I do and my advocacy. And so I do have some people comment on my posts or on my news articles that I come out on, and they'll comment ignorant things, telling me I'm not who I am or trying to tell me how I should be. But I just ignore that because they don't know me and I don't know them. I know myself. And so by being myself, no one can tell me different.
What are some of the positive experiences?
The positive experiences that have been brought to me are being elected and nominated to be on the Treaty 3 2S LGBTQIA+ council. And from being on that council and still a youth, I was asked to sit on the Ontario First Nations Young People's Council. And I've just served a year term on the Ontario Youth Council. And in March, from advocating and speaking up at the Assembly of First Nations gathering in December, I spoke up against the bathroom violence that happened to me for wearing a ribbon skirt. Chiefs of Ontario have elected me and selected me to be on the National Two-Spirit Council. So now I'm representing at Treaty 3, Ontario, and nationally for Indigenous peoples.
Can you elaborate on those experiences a bit? Do you feel like you're making change?
So with Chiefs of Ontario, my first gathering was in June 2022, and I didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't know exactly what I signed up for, or I was filling in for someone else from the Treaty 3 area, and the Ontario First Nations Young People's Council had just accepted that I would be in that council as a replacement. And so I started working with a whole bunch of leadership throughout Ontario and chiefs all across, and the different political territorial organizations like Treaty 3, NAN, Anishinaabe Nation. And so I do a lot of leadership and counseling those chiefs and making decisions for our communities and making sure that representation is there and opening the floor and safe spaces for Two-Spirit peoples, because Ontario doesn't yet have a Two-Spirit council or even visible people out there. Like, I myself present as very masculine, but some days I'll wear a ribbon skirt while I'm out there. So it's something that I really advocate for while I'm out there, is for more spaces. Like, I was invited to the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly in December 2022, and I wore a ribbon skirt one day, and a chief looked at me in the bathroom, walked out, looked at me again, and asked if he was in the right place. And it was just like walking in a room full of chiefs all across Ontario and getting those disgusting stares, like, what am I doing there? Or, why are you wearing a ribbon skirt? Like, you're not a woman. Or, but they don't know me. Like I said, they don't know me. They don't know who I am. I am a water carrier. I do have those parts in ceremony, as well as firekeeping. I do have those parts in ceremony as well. It was tough wearing the skirts while I'm out there, but it's needed for more Two-Spirit peoples to be there. And I love making people feel uncomfortable with my presence, so that once they get used to me, they can get used to more, you know? And I'd love to invite more Two-Spirit peoples and youth out to these events, because it's very needed. They need to hear us. They need to listen to us, because they can't decide for us while they're out making decisions. We have to be there helping them with those decisions.
What kind of advice would you have for youth who are exploring their gender identities?
You don't need to pick a label. You don't need to decide one day I'm this and then the next feel something totally different. Gender is very fluid. I know for myself, my expression is very fluid. Some days I'm more masculine, some days I'm more feminine, and that's okay. You don't have to truly pick one label, because even in Anishinaabe Moen, there are no pronouns. And so for you to set yourself a deadline on what you're identifying as, that's unreasonable, because I'm still exploring my gender and sexuality, and people still do, even when they're like elders or when they're in their middle age, like they're still exploring their gender and sexuality. And so society has led us to believe that we need to label ourselves. We don't.
Yeah. What can adults do to support the growth and development of a youth who's part of the 2S LGBTQ+ community?
Adults need to understand that youth know who they are. You know, I see a lot of parents and even just teachers saying like, hey, you can't wear that, you can't play with those toys. You know, if a kid wants to play with Barbies and they're not necessarily born as female, that's okay. Or if a kid likes wearing a dress, or a kid likes wearing a suit, you know, that's okay. We need to accept that our youth aren't gonna fit our gender norms that we have been putting on by society. You know, we're allowed to explore our gender and sexuality at a young age. We don't have to tell them, wait until you're 18 to decide who you are, because it's the parents that are scared, it's the adults that are scared, it's the youth that know who they are.
Wow, yeah. Wise words. Miigwech Kieran, thank you so much for being here. For this special Pride Month episode, we spoke with Kieran Davis. He is a Two-Spirit youth from Lac Seul First Nations, co-host of When the Frogs Sleep podcast, and a representative of Treaty 3's 2S LGBTQIA+ Council, as well as the Ontario First Nations Young People's Council. Be sure to check us out on social media and our YouTube channel for new episodes of Kahkenuh Aweyuk. This is Terry Tikinagan, miigwech to everyone listening.
Gananantunanina anukiwan ke maskawishkagawaj an sinnawak. Tikinagan abinoji sigama unanantunawan anukinaganan. Gigaminigo minno untasiwan hukiwan. Jimino tibahigatagan kiwichi gowanan. Mina chigaganagatek ina tasiwi wichiwewan. Mina anukiwa kikanohamagawan. Kiwagan tikinagan.org/anukiwan.
Thank you for listening to Kahkenuh Aweyuk, Everyone Together on TikTok Radio, hosted by Tikinagan Child and Family Services. Miigwech.